Good afternoon, ladies and gents, and welcome to our webinar, A Blueprint for Customer Value Management in the New Economy. And this webinar is being co-hosted by Microsoft and inQuba. So welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony Odler and I'm going to be your host and your admin for today. And just before I introduce our speakers, perhaps a little bit of context. So customer value management includes being able to determine how your customers value your offering. But in 2020, as you know, the things that customers value have changed as they have accelerated their migration to digital channels and what have you. Their journeys are a lot less orderly. And what we're going to do today is we have designed this webinar to basically present an approach to customer value management in this new normal. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Like many of you, I imagine, some of us are sitting in our homes, so we just ask for some understanding if you hear some background noise or anything like that. There will be Q&A towards the end of the session. So if you have some questions during this session, please feel free to submit them through the little questions gadget on the webinar platform, and we'll do our best to address them in real time towards the end. If we can't address them in real time, we will address them after the fact. And please do stick around. We'll make sure that you get the slideware as well as the recording of this as soon as we've managed to pull it all together. So at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce our speakers for today. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce James Farrell from Microsoft. James, why don't you introduce yourself quick?
Hello, folks. Thanks for having me on. So James Farrell, I'm the head of industry. Financial services industry strategy for Microsoft here in Australia.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Great to have you here. And Trent, MD from inQuba. Trent?
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks very much for your time and attention this afternoon. Obviously very exciting to be spending time with Microsoft today to share what we've been doing in the customer journey space. We've been working with Microsoft for a number of years, and we're very excited about this opportunity to take the partnership even further. I think we've got some exciting insights in terms of how we can use the base platforms that are offered through Microsoft Azure and what we're doing in the customer journey space. So really looking forward to having the time with you this afternoon.
That's brilliant. Thanks, guys. I'm very excited about today. I am just about going to exit the discussion, but at this point, I'm just going to hand over controls to you, Trent. Should just take a moment. Here it comes.
Thanks, Ant. This is kind of one of those curtain calls, and we get to just swap over to an alternative screen, just giving me the ability to share my monitor with the audience today. Great. I think we are good to go. And I'm going to be starting off today with getting a macro perspective on what's happening in the environment, and James is going to be taking us through that. So, James, over to you.
Okay, so do you want to flick on to the first slide there? Okay, all right. So I'm not sure, is this slide building? There we go. All right. So I've got a reasonably busy slide here. So I think, I'll just talk to it generally rather than going through each individual point. And I think that what we're seeing is that, you know, financial services, like any industry, the greatest asset really are people. And the employees are at the heartbeat of operations and customer engagement or customer service. And whether this is on-site or remote, employees with the right collaboration tools are far more effective to partner with each other and to address business needs and service customers. Now, obviously, in time of crisis, like we've seen over the last 9 months or so, 10 months of this year, you know, workplace safety has become a top priority, and protecting employees and keeping employees safe has been critical, as has been keeping customers safe. And so we've seen this as being, you know, one of the key forces that just, you know, we've all heard about. Transformational change has been accelerated through the year. But not only has it been the changes that we've seen have been around keeping employees safe, but it's also keeping customers safe, and it's that customer interaction. And so obviously we've seen a lot of digitizing of that, but we've also seen we've seen a shift in the way that customers are employees are interacting with customers, and we're even seeing some of our healthcare workers and systems and solutions and ideas that would normally be used in a clinical environment are being brought across to other industries, that's quite interesting. But if we look at changing customer expectations as well, we see that we're obviously leveraging digital and mobile and phone as limited branches are opened and branches have got reduced hours. We're expecting consistent, and yet the customers are expecting consistent service across channels. And we're finding that employees are working from home. It's actually, remote working has become remote selling. And so it's like the customer journey, if you want to map it onto that, has changed significantly through the year. We're also seeing cost optimization with legacy systems. We're seeing volatility in the market, and key economic data shows continued downward pressure on costs. So this has set off organizations to identify ways to save on costs and invest in areas to drive sustainable growth. And the crisis is really accelerating this. Additionally, the drive for a frictionless customer experience calls for banks to transform their legacy technology to support new demand for the right experience at the right time through the right channel. Siloed data and siloed systems that don't interoperate fail to keep up with the new pace of business. And while the cloud was once considered a major security risk, banks are now looking to leverage the flexibility and scalability of the cloud in a safe and compliant manner. And it's quite interesting that the likes of Microsoft is spending billions of dollars a year on security and creating that secure or securing the threat protection, the threat surface of the bank. And this is far more than any individual bank could possibly invest on their own. And so arguably the cloud is more secure than and provides a more secure environment than a bank or a normal organization could. We're seeing changing business models, the rise of non-traditional players, and fintechs are forcing the banks to change their business strategy and embrace new business models that blend third-party products and capabilities into their own banks. We're seeing the rise of open banking around the world. Here in Australia, it's driven by the consumer data right. Obviously, you've got PSD2 in the UK and Europe, and you've got various other places around the world are adopting open banking. But the risk of not considering new business models is massive, and banks that don't get that don't get this will effectively be in danger of becoming irrelevant. And so it's a critical change. Fraud and cybercrime is another area. We see this as I think we all see this as being on the rise. We've got with sanctioned individuals, terrorists, financiers, increasingly using more sophisticated means to move money around and circumvent protections. Governments around the world are trying to fight back, and a quarter of the banks around the world think that cybercrime risk is the top threat to the industry. Regulators are cracking down on penalties, and the penalties for banks are growing severely, and we've seen this here in Australia as a result of the Royal Commission into Banking. Failing to find and stop transactions with sanctioned organisations can be catastrophic, which moves us to regulation, which the industry is experiencing a level of regulatory scrutiny that is unprecedented, and really regulatory compliance is having a profound effect on the business models of the financial institutions. And ironically, there's no competitive advantage in compliance. So therefore, you would have thought that regulatory compliance and risk management, whilst they remain at the top priorities for the banks, the data is the key transformation is key to transforming these. But the critical thing is that the banks they have to meet regulatory compliance, but there's no competitive advantage in it, and so they might as well just do it in the most efficient manner possible. The amount of structured and unstructured data that financial institutions need to analyze has grown and will continue to grow exponentially. Insight into risk management and regulatory compliance is central to the industry. So financial institutions that best manage and monetize the data will be on a strong path, and really we see those taking over. I'm just not too sure what else to say on this slide. There's obviously more to go, but I think in consideration of time, let's keep going. Move to the next slide, please. Really, customers, and in addition, customers want a greater personalized service and support. They want more from their, they want a kind of we talk about omni-channel experience, which is what they want. And really, that's where I see that what we're doing with Microsoft and our broad range of partners, of which inQuba is one of those. And when I look at the partner ecosystem that Microsoft has, there's something like 760,000 partners globally. This is a giant ecosystem. And what we do at Microsoft is that we categorize our partners into all sorts of different groups, and the top tier of those partners that we work with are a group that we have, which is called IP co-sell partner. It's a tag that we use, and inQuba is in amongst that top group of partners that we work with. And what this means is that we have sort of integrated our processes together. We've done a lot of due diligence around the likes of inQuba, and we've worked a lot with them and in their solution area, and we now go to market with them jointly. And so when I look at our differentiate our competitive advantage for Microsoft, it's not only in the tools and products that we have, but it's also in the tight integration that we have with the likes of inQuba. And so when I think about customer experience, and especially the changes that have taken place through the course of this year, you can see that customer engagement has changed, customer insights, that through the customer engagement has changed, and through that it's become much more data intensive, and that has enabled us to gain greater customer insights and customer intelligence. And then through that, we are kind of augmenting the bank's intelligence to gain greater insights back into customers and feed that back into our customer services channel. So I just want to go through these and talk about these a little bit in more detail. So increasingly, customers are expecting a more personalized banking experience, and we're seeing that across the board. And the importance of customer experiences is kind of amplified when you put it in the context of the customer journey. So all points where your customer comes into contact with the bank, at different times with different needs, and that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of the customer journey. So a holistic view of the customer is the starting point for improving the experience along with each of these touch points. And so this is the point where let's say we talk about, for instance, relationship managers and account managers. They can view customer records or all the details of their commercial customers. The customer-facing teams can see how a person is responding to specific communications, for example, if customers are opening emails or texts. So relationship managers can utilize dashboards to help them plan their day and organize things that they need to get done. The dashboard provides information such as upcoming meetings and relationship health index associated with those individuals, and opportunities with activity levels and open tasks. They can leverage powerful inline capabilities like a relationship assistant feature to focus on the right opportunities, actions, and activities. So if we look at the customer insights, they're there really to provide better service and more meaningful interactions. So bank employees need a complete view of the customer, and if you again look at the relationship managers and call center agents, they need better insights to personalize engagement and know their customers fully in order to support their needs. If we look now at customer intelligence, banks are looking for insights and data points to gain a more granular understanding of customers and their staff, so their staff can stay informed to surface recommendations around opportunities and to engage and offer guidance. So at this stage, predictive analytics and machine learning tools can help alert customers, alert and advise of the next best action to serve their customers. Microsoft and our partners specifically can help customers power their customer intelligence with high-end statistical modeling tools. You know, we have obviously have Azure Machine Learning, which identifies patterns and trends and can uncover latent needs and predict future behavior and predict the best times to offer customers these new services. And then augmented intelligence. So with customers engaged across multiple channels, banks need to establish a consistent service approach that delivers a seamless experience. Now, this means that 24/7 support and increasingly digital engagement are a key component in addition to the human-led channels. So banks in turn want to make sure that its channels are integrated so that relationship and advisory roles can follow up after initial service engagement. And so what we're really looking at is a true omni-channel experience. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So when we look at the Microsoft advantage, really what we're looking at is unified, a single solution with a unified customer experience suite, CRM, call center, social, native workflow capabilities, chat, robotic process automation. All of these things are really joined in terms of a single seamless environment. And yeah, and really what when we look at where does when we look at the end of this, when we're talking about where do we put our data, so I think the other thing that's really important is as we're all moving to the cloud, I think the most important thing is trust. And where are you going to trust? Which cloud provider are you going to trust the most with your most important data? And when I look at, if I'm looking at all the cloud providers and all the places that you can put your data and you can, I think that because this is all about data, I think that the most important thing is trust. And Microsoft has worked tirelessly with the regulators. We've worked with governments, we've worked to make sure that we've created the right controls around our cloud environment such that banks and other organizations can trust where they're placing their data and can trust Microsoft. And if you're not familiar with our Trust Center, there's a whole portal where we place all our compliance data, we place our compliance information, we've got white papers. I really encourage you to go and look at our Trust portal. We take trust very seriously at Microsoft, and this is trust from the regulators and trust with our partners and customers. Scale and compliance and security, I think these three things, I think really is what for us is what all of this comes down to. So over to you, Trent.
Thanks, James. I think certainly James has set a great context for the macro dynamics at play in the market. And as he said, organizations, and particularly financial institutions, really are required to make significant investments, and certain of those are table stakes, such as compliance, and other areas in the area of customer engagement and customer experience are really the opportunity to differentiate and offer something fundamentally different to the market. It's obviously this new world of working remotely, of servicing clients, selling online is obviously brings with it a number of different challenges. And what's often useful to do is just to have a framework to reflect on to use as a basis for determining how to interact with your client base. So when we look at the whole domain of customer value management, there are a couple of aspects that are particularly important. One of those obviously is market insight, which is really around asking the target market, what would they look for when they're looking for new services. Then a view of value assessment. That's looking at how customers actually rate the value you provide, obviously relative to your competitors. And then taking that value and actually optimizing it, and that's really about deciding what changes you're going to make within your organization to offer more value to the end customer. In turn, you have to operationalize that within the organization and make sure that everyone in your organization is aligned and delivering value, that common focus on value delivery to the end customer. And obviously, if you're going to do that, if you're going to operationalize it, you need a means to measure and give guidance to how value is being delivered. And that's really where the value analytics come into play, making sure that there's this consistent flow of data into the organization in order that they can make the right choices. And when you pull those 5 aspects together, ultimately, this leads to business success where you are winning customers, you keeping employees on sides, and ultimately you keeping those the shareholders very happy. So obviously value management is a very valuable discipline, but it is complex and there are many aspects to it. And ultimately what you want to do is you want to have a very focused approach, and often it's quite difficult to get a sense of how exactly do you get a view on how value is being delivered and what is the experience of the end customer. From an inQuba point of view, and in particular through our partnership with Microsoft, we've adopted an approach that is very much data-centric, and this builds on the great capabilities that are inherent in the Microsoft infrastructure. So what we are able to do is we're able to use data to actually find patterns in the interactions that customers have with organizations, be that banks, be that insurance companies, be that investment companies, and ready to get a sense of how they're interacting with the organization, getting a visual view of that, which I'll be sharing with you a little later in the presentation. What is equally important and possibly more important is how are the customers feeling? What emotional insights can we gain as they interact with the organization? And based on those emotional insights, what choices can we make about how we deliver value to the end customer? And that really gives you those tools to then optimize how to align the organization, how to make choices, and really we can take big advantage of the machine learning capabilities that form part of Microsoft Azure to make sure that the right choices for many customers are made on a very personalized basis. We've done this for a number of organizations. Some of them that we're able to mention are organizations such as Suncorp, a large insurance banking group, FNB, also a large financial organization. We work with various large banks, global insurers, and a large telco, taking projects like this to the market. And the results that we've seen are really been phenomenal. We're managing to achieve 80 to 120% increase in conversion at key moments of truth within the customer journey. And very importantly, for those that are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, we're seeing a 20-point increase. So really amazing results by using the approaches that we adopt today. So when we look at the actual operational model in support of customer journey optimization, at a macro level, it's pretty simple. You take this data-driven view of the customer journey, and then you look at the degree to which you as an organization are helping the end customer achieve their goals, and the degree to which the experience is delivering in line with the expectation. And then it's really about putting a set of interventions in place to meet a target goal achievement and experience. So I think that's a 3-step process. It's pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. The question obviously is, how do you do that? How do you get to that target goal achievement and that great experience? Well, I think that's really where the technology comes into play. And what we're able to do is by visualizing data, we can get a view on the customer journey and the insights of the customer. And then what we're able to do is we're able to work with your organization to put various interventions in place. So obviously, if there's a service failure, you want to bring about service recovery. If the customer is not progressing towards their goal, either because they're too busy or there might be an information obstacle in place, there's a potential to send out nudges and actually nudge them towards their goal. And then stepping back and systemically looking at the organization to determine what people, product, and system improvements are necessary, and ultimately bringing all three of those components together in a strategy and adding to that the strategic choices that the organization should be making in order to deliver true value to their end customer. And once we get all of those components lined up, the result is obviously the ROI. There's going to be an investment necessary in this technology. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we want to make sure that we've got very happy customers that are utilizing the services of your financial institution, and ultimately your shareholders are looking for a return on the investment that they're making. So inQuba has been doing this for quite some time. We are fortunate to be recognized in the market as one of the leaders in journey technology. One of the more recent reports that came out is from an organization called Quadrant, where we were rated as one of the technology leaders, relatively new to this particular space. We really are quite excited about the progress that we're making within the market. So let's pull together this whole idea of customer value management and what we're doing from an inQuba point of view in terms of journey optimization. So I ran through earlier the whole approach of customer value management, market insight, value assessment, value optimization, operationalizing that within the organization, using analytics to understand how value is delivered, and ultimately driving business success. And we think that that is a great reference point for driving out optimizations of customer journeys. And to make this a little bit more focused and ultimately give strong direction to our client base, we developed a 5-step process to drive optimization of journeys. And that starts off, number one, by discovering the journeys through data. Second of all, by understanding the customers and particularly understanding their emotional interaction. The third is then looking at this interplay between journeys and emotions to obtain deep insights. And then designing strategies of intervention. I spoke about our operational model in the 4 quadrants. We put interventions in place to actually drive optimizations. And then there's a continual process of review and optimization. So why do we need this? Well, if you've been through a process of putting a new product together and releasing that to market, you know that you will design your customer experience to be completely elegant. And we hear in the market on a continuous basis about straight-through processing. And obviously, the intention is that it's a simple process. In this particular case, we're looking at application experience, and it's going from application to accept quote to documentation to activation. And that typically is the model experience. Of course, the real world is somewhat different to that. Let's think about an application experience in reality. So a customer might, for argument's sake, start off in a branch, might go online. They might go online for the second time, speak to an agent, go back to a branch, speak to an agent, send in an email, get annoyed, go to Twitter, speak to an agent. And in this particular case, we're actually not getting to the activation. The customer, in fact, hasn't completed the process, and they are another statistics in the pipeline of customers that haven't met their particular goal. And with that in mind, we need a more structured approach to make sure that we do deliver value and we do ensure that the customer reaches their end goal, which I think is very much aligned between your organization and the end customer to get to activation. So we've been doing a number of projects in this space, and I'm going to give you a quick flavor of one of those with an organization that we've been working with recently. It is a large financial services organization, and really what they aim to do is get a far more deep understanding of the clients at risk, and look at how we can put highly personalized retention and strategies in place and engage with customers that were potentially at risk. So it started off by collecting a large amount of data. And as we were doing that, obviously, what we started to see is large patterns of interaction. It really wasn't particularly clear up front in terms of where the issues were. But by using a approach of zooming in, we start to understand this relationship between when customers were actually making their payments, so the particular point of interest here is the investment payment, and what was in fact leading to being paid up being ultimately the termination of the policy. And using the data capabilities that we have within the inQuba platform, we're able to see patterns of interaction with this particular organization. And that was a great start, but we needed to take it further. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand who these customers were that were interacting and actually getting to the paid up status, what specific nudges were necessary to actually drive them forward, and in particular, when those nudges should in fact be triggered. Now, let's just explore each one of those in a little bit more depth. First of all, looking at the who. Well, the who was really about looking at attributes of customers that fitted into different groups. So the first group we looked at were high-risk customers with low advocacy. Obviously, these would be a significant concern. Fortunately, they were at a level of medium affordability. The next group were far lower risk, also medium affordability. And the last group were various risk levels, so high, medium, and low affordability. So you've got very different forces at play for these three different groups. And obviously, what you want to do is you want to put nudges in place that align to them. So just to give you a sense of the nature of those nudges, for the high-risk customers is really around adding additional value. Really what we position there is some highly personalized communications related to a value-added investment course. With regards to the customers that were medium and low risk, there was really about pointing out the value that was inherent in the investment and making sure that they were optimizing the investment choices within their portfolio. And then with regards to the low affordability, it's really looking at their points of concern, and very topical at the moment is obviously COVID, and levels of income protection are necessary to take those customers forward. And then obviously we had to map that back to the customer journey and get a sense of exactly when we should trigger off those various communications. So as we started to interact and have these dialogues with customers, we obviously saw slightly different patterns. So looking at the low affordability, obviously their level of financial comfort was much lower than the other groups. And in terms of understanding information on the actual products, we started to see that certain of the documentation was confusing and that the customers actually needed help. And this started to inform what are the interventions that were necessary within this organization to address the specific needs of these different audiences and start to optimize the process and put those interventions in place. So that certainly gave a high degree of steerage in terms of where the focus should be. So drilling down into a little bit more of the detail and how the inQuba journey methodology works, what I'd like to do is come back to this 5-step process and talk you through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So just to recap, we have the first step, which is discovering journeys. So looking at where customers are leaving the organization or falling off. We spoke earlier about the ideal customer path versus the actual customer path. Then understanding the customers and understanding emotionally, how are they feeling? How are they feeling on this journey to be able to engage with the organization, or once they are actually a customer, how are they feeling about the interaction with the brand? And then bringing that all together to get a really deep insight in terms of this interplay between what customers are feeling and what they're doing. And then probably the most important aspect is actually designing strategies in a very systemic way by putting personalized interventions in place and then iterating through those on a continuous basis to make sure that you can optimize the journey and truly deliver value, going right back to where James started, making sure that you differentiate what you offer to the market. So starting off with step one. And that's really around taking in data. We ingest data from a large number of systems external to inQuba. A lot of that data will be sitting in systems such as line of business systems, your channel systems, your website, your app, as well as sitting in well-established applications, obviously like Dynamics 365. And that really allows us to get a sense of how customers are interacting with your organization. And the important point here is that this is not a theoretical view of how customers are interacting. It is, in fact, a real view based on data. And the views that we have on the journey are generated views. They're not diagrammatic in nature, and they're certainly not similar to those exercises that are undertaken, the brown paper exercises. They give you a very real world of what's happening in the organization. And then what we can do is we can obviously overlay that by looking at our understanding of customers, looking at different customers with different needs fitting into different segments. And it's this very approach that we actually used in the case study that I spoke about earlier. By understanding both the customer and the journey, we are able to get a sense of how different customers are making different choices. I'm sure for those of you on the line that are more technical in nature, you're asking the question, well, how do we do this? And that's really where the technology comes into play, and we start to use some of the data techniques that we have available to us. So our starting point for visualizing these journeys is by taking in operational data. And as I said earlier, we provide a number of tools to ingest this data, and that data then gives rise to the visualization of the customer journey. What you're actually seeing diagrammatically in this particular flow at the top is that you are seeing different nodes, excuse me, and you are seeing the flows between those various nodes. And obviously, the thicker the line, the more customers are following those particular paths. The thinner lines mean that there are less customers traversing those nodes. And then what we do is, by collecting insights and having interactions with the customer, we're able to overlay that with the insights from customers, getting a sense of exactly how they're feeling, taking unstructured text. In this particular example, it's processing a tweet that happened on Twitter and applying text analytics to it. And then we also create a series of artificial transactions, or virtual transactions as we refer to them. In this particular case, an elapsed transaction. And that's really looking at a situation where a customer has acted and then has ceased to act. And often that's really important to understand within a customer journey. So what you're really trying to do is you're trying to get a sense of when customers are not progressing. So let's call it a non-transaction, but from a data point of view, we have to create that in the system, and that's how we create this notion of a elapsed transaction. So when you think of a customer going along a customer journey, the question obviously is, well, how do we get a sense of what their customer's up to? And again, data really comes into play, and this is why our partnership with Microsoft works so well, because it's very much a data-intensive process. And what we're able to do is we're able to listen to customers by bringing in lots of diverse data sets. We can engage with them directly to collect insights. We can collect data from social media. We can look at emails that the customer is bringing in. And from that, we can start to get a sense of how the customer is progressing. So a customer might start off in interacting with your organization and be somewhat confused. Hopefully, they'll get clarity over a period of time. If, for argument's sake, they're in a situation of being an insurance client, they might get to the point of being particularly angry. And then hopefully, as things progressed, they'll get to the point of being grateful that the issue is resolved. And ultimately, what we're all looking to do is we're all looking to make sure that we've got delighted customers that are really spreading the gospel about your particular brand. So what we do is we reach out to those customers. We collect the feedback at different points within the customer journey. And this is, again, capabilities that are inherent in the actual tool itself. And then we ask customers for feedback, both structured feedback and unstructured feedback. And we overlay that on the customer journey to get these really deep insights about what's happening within the customer's experience of your particular brand. I think the important thing here is, obviously, all of this is brought together within a single platform to get a deep sense of how customers are interacting. And what we're able to do is we're then able to compare customers that, for argument's sake, are having great experiences and those that are having not so great experiences, and understand why is that different. And often by looking at the segments of the customers and looking at how those customers are different, we can start to understand why some of the customer journeys are working really well and why others of those are not working particularly well. So it really is a far more advanced way of understanding the customer experience by using the data capabilities within the platform itself. Once we've got this understanding by ingesting data and understanding the emotional context of the customer, it's really on to the actions that you can bring about within an organization. And this is where the orchestration starts to come into play. And by understanding each of the customers and getting a profile of those customers, we've got very strong capabilities, particularly rules-based capabilities within the platform. And we can start to put interventions in place. Back to what I spoke about in the operational model. So they could be service recovery interventions. They potentially could be nudges, personalized communications. They could be improvements in the systems, process, and people. We put those in place in order to improve the interaction that the customers are having with your organization. Now, to do this really effectively, and just think about how to interact. If you, in a situation, imagine a financial advisor interacting with the end customer. Their starting point is they need to understand the emotional state of the customer. That's so important in order to communicate effectively, and that's sometimes why things like webinars are quite a challenge. It's very difficult for me to understand those people that are attending today, what is their emotional state. Obviously, using technology such as the inQuba platform, we can do that very effectively. Then what you need to do is you need to start to understand, well, how do you profile those customers? What audience groups do they fit into? Because you need to start messaging them. And I showed you a little bit earlier how we've done that with a financial services customer. And then it's a case of starting to match the content with that audience using the rules capabilities within the platform, and then making sure that the communication are happening exactly at the right time. So obviously, if you, for argument's sake, want to sell an education policy, you'd go through a process of, first of all, understanding the relationship of the parent with its children. You start to understand, whether, for instance, they have a high level of affordability or not in the audience context. You then prepare content that's relevant to say, imagine a future about your child graduating from uni, and ultimately you want to make sure that you nudge it at the right time. So, for instance, when it's bonus time, you want to be messaging them about making that particular investment. So we use that approach to send out communications, and then we go through a process of optimization. So seeing exactly how those communications are either being effective or potentially are failing, and making sure that we optimize them to get the right results. And there's a couple of techniques that we use to be able to do that. We use control groups that obviously get no communication, and we differentiate those from our test groups. And within our test groups, what we're able to do is then send out various communications or various nudges, be those people-to-people or electronic nudges, and start to understand how different nudges result in different outcomes. And importantly, right through this whole process, we're keeping track of exactly what is the impact, what is the bottom line impact, because much as it's important to be engaging with customers and making them feel great about life, what we really want to do is we want to make sure that those actions are in fact translating to a bottom line impact. I want to wrap things up by taking you through a scenario at a little slightly more detailed level. And this particular scenario is one where we've got a customer interacting and having a couple of challenges in terms of getting a motor claim resolved. So the context is a high-value customer that's at high risk. The experience is that they've gone through a motor claim. They've had a series of interactions with the insurance company and its associated suppliers. And there's along the way, we're getting various pieces of feedback of poor communication, poor service, and poor workmanship. The focus here is on service recovery and on nudging. So those are the particular areas. Obviously, other scenarios would be focusing on more systemic improvements. So let's just go through a story of Charlotte. Charlotte has had a bit of an unfortunate week. She had an accident on her way back from work, and she starts off by trying to register that claim. She had to have a number of interactions with the insurer. She got particularly frustrated in trying to register the claim, but eventually she overcomes those obstacles, and she starts to rearrange her meetings, and she takes an Uber to the car hire branch. This is a service that's offered through this particular insurer, and the car that she was expecting to get wasn't ready, and she had to wait, and it wasn't clean. So it's just adding to her level of frustration. Time goes by, and 10 days later, it is Friday morning, and she finally gets a call from the panel beater to say her car was ready, but obviously she's not in a position to rearrange her life to go and accept the vehicle. And she makes arrangements to have the car hire for a little bit longer for that particular weekend, ultimately collecting it on the Monday morning. And again, she's in fact disappointed by the fact that the car had a scraping sound, and there was a scratch. So obviously not having a particular great experience. And this might sound like a very artificial scenario, but I'm sure many of you had discussions like this, and while you're having a discussion around the barbie on a Friday or Saturday night, often stories such as this come out. So how could we interact where we're having bad communication, poor service, and poor workmanship? Well, obviously, if a solution such as the inQuba journey optimization solution was in play, we'd start off by, for argument's sake, getting feedback from the customer about her car hire experience, and she immediately provides feedback that she had to wait and that the car was dirty. We're able to then escalate that into a prioritization case, which is routed to Jennifer in this particular case within our fictitious company, Transatlantic Insurance. Jennifer in turn engages with Charlotte to resolve the issue, and Jennifer then makes sure that she puts Charlotte in contact with the car hire organization. Sam from Auto Car Hire makes contact with Charlotte, resolves the issue. In this particular case, makes arrangements for the car to be dropped off on the Monday. So, obviously, if you had left Charlotte to her own devices, she would have been in a situation where she would have been frustrated. And by monitoring the customer experience, by getting the feedback, what we're able to do here is we're able to make sure that we put the right interventions in place and actually make sure that Charlotte has a really great experience. And ultimately, what we're able to do is we're able to boost the retention of this customer. And when you are doing this at scale, you obviously need to use automated rules and machine learning to determine who exactly to interact with. And you need the platform to be managing all of this to make sure that this is a fully scalable solution. So I think really in closing, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts about how we can potentially help you. We've developed the inQuba solution to be quite differentiated. So we don't have a strong development dependency. We know that your organizations have long pipelines of prioritization, making it quite challenging for you to get projects integrated. And therefore, we've adopted a light touch approach for ingesting data. We're able to get to insights really rapidly. We think it's particularly important that any solution of this nature has to be such that it really gives you speed to insight. It gives you very strong intervention clarity. Where should I be intervening? What should I be doing? Who should I be targeting? And then going through a process of rapid iteration, ultimately making sure that the right choices are made and driving very tangible ROI out of the solution. You might, at this particular point in time, and we've shared a tremendous amount of information, be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, saying, well, that sounds interesting, but how do I map it to my particular organization? What is my entry point? And if we go back to our 5-step process of discovering journeys, understanding customers, getting that deep insights, and designing these strategies for intervention and reviewing and optimizing, what we're able to do is we can work with you, and we offer an approach around the concept of a journey accelerator. And really what the journey accelerator is, it's 3 simple steps. You schedule a 2-hour interactive workshop with ourselves. One of our account managers and project managers will be in contact to be able to do that. We'll work with you and we'll recap on the concepts we've been through today. We'll map out your customer journey. We'll look at your customer profiles. We'll look at those opportunities for nudging. We'll look at the data requirements to be able to tee up the project, and we'll work with you to come up with a quantifiable ROI. And then what you'll get is you'll get a journey accelerator pack, which has got this high-level journey design, something that hopefully you could use across the organization should you progress with the project or not. We'll make sure that we've got a fully documented view, and we'll give you an ROI modeler that gives you a sense of what the cost of the implementation is going to be, as well as the benefits that'll arise from an approach such as this. I think that from a timing point of view, I think we've done pretty well today. Brings us pretty much to near the end of today's formal proceedings, but it is an opportunity to go through Q&A, and I'm going to hand back to Anthony, who is going to take us through some questions that have come through.
Thanks, Trent. So thank you very much, guys. That was very interesting. What I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to skip Q&A. We've got 1 or 2 questions, but I'm going to make sure that we address them after the fact. I'd actually prefer to use the last couple of minutes that we've got just for final thoughts and reflections. James, you've heard quite a lot in terms of what Trent's been saying. I'm just wondering if maybe there's an opportunity for you to reflect some of the bits that resonate and examples that you've seen.
Thank you, Anthony. So yes, and it's just fascinating because what we're seeing here, this is a data journey, and we're using data to get deep insights into our customers, how we interact with them, and how we can improve the way that we operate. And we're even measuring that, and I'm thinking about, there's all sorts of customers here at Microsoft that we do that with. I'm thinking Bank West comes to mind, that they had their customers around their mortgage or small business loans, and what they wanted to do was improve their interaction, and they ended up building an appointment booking system. But I mean, and putting that online. But this is what they've done, is just kind of one little slice of the customer journey, and that's what they've attacked, is just one little element. But what I'm really interested to see here, that Trent's talking about, is looking at mapping the whole journey and mapping it from a data perspective, and then using that data to then create a holistic view of that journey and really transforming that. And I think that's an exciting step that can be made.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks, James. Any final thoughts from your side, Trent?
Yeah, I think certainly as we progress towards 2021, I think it's been lockdown and survival mode, and organizations are going to be looking for opportunities to grow their businesses. They're going to be looking to opportunities to differentiate. And I think there's a very exciting space that arises out of that, to get a little bit more personal. As we move to a world of more data and more AI and more automation, people and customers are embracing those channels. But it's important not to lose sight of the fact that there are individuals. Those individuals are real people with real lives. They've got families, they've got stresses at home. They're thinking about many things. And going back almost to the basics, I'm sure many of you, or maybe not all of you, but certain people of more my age, remember the personalized grocer that you'd go to that would keep your your personalized preferences with vegetables. And while those days are maybe a little bit behind us, certainly using the technologies and capabilities where we bring together some of the infrastructure components that Microsoft has on offer, together with the additional differentiation components that inQuba overlays, I think we can take customers back to a world of feeling special again, and making sure that they're not having conversations about terrible customer experiences, but rather talking about these amazing experiences that obviously that they're celebrating and that they're very excited about. So thank you very much, James, for partnering us today. We really appreciate your time and taking time out of your very busy diary to be with us. Thank you for all the participants today. Very grateful for your time. We will be following up with a communication, which includes recordings to the webinar, as well as the slide material. And thank you very much for Anthony. Anthony not only took a tremendous amount of effort in giving guidance to the session today, but really was instrumental in a lot of what the lead up was today's webinar. So thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate the opportunity to interact. We really look forward to hopefully running a series of Journey Accelerator workshops with you.
Brilliant. Thank you to our attendees for an hour of your time, and thank you once again to our speakers, James and Trent, and to everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.
Thank you.